Good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to day 2 of our CoMoUK Collaborative Mobility Conference. I'm really sorry that I can't see you all in person today. It's a real shame, but I am very pleased to see how many people we can welcome into the session. I hope you enjoyed day 1. If you didn't manage to make the sessions, you can see recordings of them, which will be on our session page of our website. I just wanted to take a quick moment, if I can, to say thank you so much to our sponsors for this event. We are a charity, and there isn't any way that we could be doing this without your help. So particularly thanks to Bolt, but yeah, great to have your support for this. So today we have 2 sessions for you. This afternoon there is a session that is dedicated completely to rural transport, but this morning is all about mobility hubs. I'm really excited about mobility hubs. It's a concept that I first heard about 2 years ago when we started work with the EU project, which was the Share North project. And it's just really a concept that's kind of taking off in the UK. I think there's something about the fact that it's a pragmatic and creative solution to integration of public, shared and active modes that's really capturing imagination and helping to enhance communities for all. So if I can work out next slide. Yep, there we go. Sorry, I'm brand new to this technology, so bear with me. We have a really interesting lineup for you today. We're going to have 4 speakers, 4 different case studies of approaches from public and private sector that are looking at mobility hubs. We have Rosita Chudasama from Nottingham City Council. We're welcoming Jeremy Wiggins from Norfolk County Council. We'll then have Anthony Down from Gascoigne Estates, followed by Frank Anatole from Network Rail. We'll then have a quick Q&A, so a chance for you to put your questions to speakers, as well as then jumping over into some breakout rooms to do a Zoom discussion workshop all about designing imaginary hubs, looking at design and quality standards. So if you will allow me, I'll just going to just spend a couple of minutes talking about CoMoUK's role in mobility hubs. So a year ago when we were in our conference in Birmingham, we were handing out these paper guides about our first introductory guide to mobility hubs paper. Do you remember that? So fast forward on 12 months, and we've now got a new introductory guide which builds on that. So the introductory guide looked at experience from overseas from our Share North project. It pulled together case studies, lessons learned, and it helps to develop typologies for hubs. So now we're 12 months on, we're looking at quality standards, and we've set out a set of 6 key success factors which we think are really important for maintaining the standards of hubs. And these are illustrated in the graphic on the screen now. So it's things like making sure that hubs are visible and accessible for all, making sure that they feel safe. Is there a really good choice of modes there? And how easy is it to get between those modes? Will people have the practical facilities that they need when they're at the hub? And really importantly, how can we use this as an opportunity to improve the visual, social community feel of an area? So we have used these criteria and put them together with our typologies to create a kind of checklist for each of the different types of hub. So this is an example on screen for suburban mini hubs, but we have slightly different versions for each of our different typologies. And this is something that we're going to look at a little bit more in our workshop later on this morning. But because CoMoUK really wants to shine a light on best practice and good examples, we have used this criteria to develop a set of accreditation standards. So authorities or other stakeholders that are developing hubs can apply for us to assess their hub against these criteria, and then we can award the bronze, silver or gold standards, which will then be able to shout about and show as a great example of what's happening in the UK. Some more details about this, I think, will be posted in the chat shortly and are also on our website, so keep an eye out for that. Also on our website, I just wanted to mention that we've got a brand new page which illustrates all of the schemes that we're aware of that are happening in the UK at the moment. You may know of others, so please let us know, because I'm sure it's not comprehensive. But we also welcome people that are working on hubs to come to join us for our quarterly forum sessions that we run, where we exchange ideas and think about the challenges to developing hubs, the next of which is on the 10th of December. So that was just a quick race through of the work that we're doing, which I wanted to highlight. I'd now like to move over to talk to our speakers. So I'm going to invite Rosita to come up to the stage, please, the virtual stage. Thanks, Rosita. We've been working with Nottingham and Derby on bike share for a number of years, so I'm kind of really excited to see how mobility hubs can help to promote bike share as part of that offer. Thank you, Rosita.
Thanks, Antonia. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all well. So I'm just going to introduce what we're doing here in Nottingham and Derby with respect to mobility hubs. Just to introduce myself, I'm the Future Transport Zone lead, so I've got the exciting role of actually delivering our programme over the next 4 years or so. So just to look back a second, we received £16.7 million of funding from the Department for Transport under the Future Transport Zone programme. Our programme is structured to include 3 different elements: mobility as a service, which I know a lot of areas are currently looking to develop. We've got a strand on a data platform, which is what we're calling it, which is all about trying to increase the amount of real-time transport information that we are collecting and therefore using to improve the customer's experience. And then finally, electric mobility hubs. There's quite a lot of integration across those 3 themes and how they sort of sit alongside or on top of the existing transport provision that we've already got here in Nottingham and Derby. So electric mobility hubs then, you'll notice that we've got E in front of mobility. That's deliberate. We've got quite a I suppose a bias, but quite a specific focus on the electric components of a hub, and we really want to try and bring those aspects out, and I'll go on to explain what I mean by that. But roughly we've got about £10 million to spend to create at least 5 quite big flagship hubs, as we're calling it. We've taken inspiration from other hubs of this nature that have been introduced in other cities around the world. We want to put communities and local businesses or local employers at the heart of this development and actually work with them to create something in a place that serves a local need. And we've structured our hubs to include 3 different types. So it's just part of a narrative. It's quite aligned to the slide that Antonia put up in terms of the different categories of hubs. Our local flavour, if you like, is to focus on neighbourhoods of the future. So hubs located in residential settings, supporting the first mile of travel, encouraging people to adopt sustainable and shared and electric modes of transport. We have a depot of the future. So this is something that the City Council here in Nottingham is putting a lot of energy into converting its own fleet to electric. So how can we sort of provide a test case for how you go on and do that can be relevant and informative to other public sector fleet organisations such as local authorities, etc. And then Campus of the Future, which is very much a workplace employer-based hub alternative. It may look different to the one that's in a residential setting, but it will be focused around people who are obviously, if this still carries on, in terms of like how people are actually traveling and getting to work. Obviously we're all working from home at the moment, so what type of hub do we need in a workplace or a university, for instance. This basket of elements is something that we came up with at the time of writing our bid, so it kind of covers the menu of different services that could be provided. It's not exhaustive. We very much want to build on the traditional or the existing modes of or services that we have around public transport provision and information, and then also bringing in all of the cycling measures, such as bike hire. We're currently looking to tender for an e-bike service provider, electric scooters, and then also things like electric vehicle charging, and then some of the added value, as I would call it, added value aspects. So things like click and collect services, maybe changing facilities to benefit local people, perhaps even a cafe where people can obviously come and linger, pop-up events where we can arrange things like doctor bike activities or led rides with communities or workplaces, so that kind of thing. So it's quite comprehensive, it's quite broad. Why electric? I suppose when we were developing our thinking around this, one of our strategic goals was around clean air. That's subsequently evolving now into carbon reduction. So the council here has got a target for carbon neutral by 2028, which is quite ambitious. So and there's lots of new modes that are electric, so electric scooters, e-bikes, e-cargo bikes, electric vehicle charging, particularly in residential settings where people don't have off-street parking, electric car clubs. So it kind of felt that that was a common theme that we wanted to try and capitalise on it and see whether we can put that at the core of what we're looking to provide. This is just a slide showing some of the possible locations for where these hubs could be deployed. So in Derby, there's an existing residential area where you could argue that habits have already been formed in terms of the way that people are travelling. How might we retrospectively be able to install a hub of some nature to try and encourage people to switch modes and try out different services? Trent Basin in Nottingham, which is on the bottom left, is a brand new development. So we're working with the developer to try and introduce a hub at the outset of the design and build of these homes as they begin to be occupied. So how can we encourage people who might not have formed their habits yet around travelling to wherever they may be going for work or leisure, and adopting new modes from the outset? The University of Nottingham obviously being a university campus, is that an option for us to work with them as a partner, or could it be a workplace such as a hospital? And then Eastcroft Depot is the council's site for the depot of the future. Here's a slide with some concepts. A bit of a disclaimer, obviously these hubs it's very unlikely that they will end up looking like this, but to illustrate the type of thing that we were sort of trying to describe, these were some graphics that we drew up at the time of writing the bid. The one on the left that's slightly larger, I appreciate it may not be that clear, but it was trying to articulate in an existing sort of terraced row of housing, how could you have a hub that brings in the different components such as public charging, bus provision, bike sharing, scooter sharing. The design of this is going to be pretty critical, because obviously there you can see that there's a massive, great big bus shelter outside somebody's house. So how do we actually design these sort of sympathetically or aesthetically pleasing in a context, in an urban context where you've already got limited road space, is going to be quite a challenge. And then on the top left, that's a image that one of the architects drew for the Trent Basin development that actually shows a building that could be purposed as a cafe. There is obviously it's called Trent Basin because it's just off the river. There's a basin alongside where you could have additional facilities. There's bike sharing, car club and EV charging displayed there as well. So this is just my final slide, just to kind of give you a teaser. But some of the things that we're obviously thinking about now is what is our definition of a electric mobility hub. Hubs are obviously, it's a phrase that's getting traction. A lot of people are talking about it. The meaning sometimes is slightly different. I suppose this is our version, and we kind of need to be clear about what that is, and it may differ from place to place. And I think it would be really interesting as part of the discussion with CoMo to look at, is there any commonality, or can we just go off and have 100 different versions of hubs and it doesn't matter necessarily because they all look different, because they're serving a local need. That's kind of an interesting point to debate, I suppose. That's very much our first action, at least. Customer expectations and managing those, and making sure that we can deliver something that people want, and it also meet the councils and other partners' aspirations and goals with this, is something that we'll obviously need to track as we go forwards. Operating models of hubs is something that we're interested in exploring. Do we use our funding and tender for a hub provider to come in to our cities, establish these hubs and run them for us? But then what happens when the funding runs out? Do we simply just find a bit of highway land that we have obviously ownership of, plonk in a bus stop, put in some EV charging, work with our car club provider to provide a car, put in some bike facilities and call it a day? Is that what a hub needs to look like? How it's going to operate, not just with the funding but beyond that, how will it be maintained, who's responsible for looking after it, is something that we want to clear off at the outset, so we know what we're doing. Because of the electric component in ours, finding the right land and ensuring that we have adequate power to that site is obviously going to be really important if we want to put in electric vehicle charging. And then obviously COVID and its impacts on our travel habits at the moment. It's a little bit unclear because we're starting in a COVID scenario, if you like. If it were normal times, we could sort of apply our sort of experience up until now in terms of planning for transport interventions. But COVID sort of turned it on its head. Everybody's at home. Does it make mobility hubs a little bit redundant, or does it actually make it even more fundamental, because it's all about local facilities, local amenities? People are staying local, obviously working from home, so they need more facilities on their doorstep. And so that kind of lends to a greater justification for hubs. That's something that's obviously up in the air. We're trying to do more surveying to understand what's happening on our transport network and what local businesses and people want. But it will be an evolving thing, I imagine. And so we just need to be responsive to that and be flexible to shaping our hubs as we go forward over the next 4 years. That was all I was going to say. It's a bit of an introduction on what we're doing. There will be a Q&A, I think, at the end, so I'm happy to take questions, but hopefully that was useful for people who are listening. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, we will do questions all together at the end, so please do pop them into the chat function, which you should all be able to see on the right-hand side. I do feel for you trying to plan in an age of COVID that is really difficult to understand what the long-lasting effects are going to be, even when the virus goes away. Really liked your point about individuality with hubs, because I think, two hubs probably should be the same, because they should meet other people's, other communities' needs. So that's a really interesting point, but where are the commonalities? So I'd now like to invite Jeremy Wiggins to come up from Norfolk County Council to tell us about the work that they're doing in Norfolk. We're also working a little bit with Norfolk because we're part of the MobiMix, another EU project that we're involved in. So I've been interested to hear how your plans have been developing. So, not your slides. Just a note. What did you want me to do? Can we just? We either need to switch to Jeremy's slides, or we need to ask Anthony to. There we go. We've switched to Jeremy's slides. Thank you very much. Okay, over to you, Jeremy.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. It's going to give you a bit of a Norfolk feel as to what our approach is to hubs and the thinking that we've got. Okay, I'll carry on. So I'm Jeremy Wiggin. I'm the Transport for Norwich manager at Norfolk County Council. I think the best way to describe what I do is if it moves in Norwich, I've probably had something to do with it. I think that's the way that I certainly look at things. We've wanted to develop the idea of mobility hubs for some time. It's an area that we've been really interested in, but we really haven't had the opportunity to do that. But the Transforming Cities funding that we've secured gives us the opportunity to do that. So we're moving forward with looking at what our mobility hub program could look like. Initially, we've identified about 33 places across the city where we think a hub would be really good to put in, but we're focusing initially on around 5 locations. So in terms of what the mobility hubs themselves, I think it's just important to there's some key factors really. And the first one I've put on there is that public transport users need the confidence to know that there are key places within the city where they can access shared mobility. Gone are the day where the choice was really just bus and trains. We've now got hire bikes, we've got e-scooters, we launched e-scooters in Norwich about 6 weeks ago, and that's going really, really well. We've already got a bike share scheme with Beryl, who also run the scooters, and we've got the Norfolk Car Club, which is very successful as well. Now, these are genuine alternatives to the car, and that's what we want. At the moment in Norwich, we've got over 85 to 90% of all vehicles on the road in the peak periods have got one person in. So shared mobility is absolutely crucial for us moving forwards to make the network run a lot more efficiently than what it does at the moment. And this is a real opportunity, I would say, to transform the passenger experience in terms of how they both access transport and how they actually move between modes. There is funding available. As I said, we're using the Transforming Cities funding, and it gives us the opportunity to really kickstart that process. And the last point on there is that mobility hubs really should be well designed so that people feel comfortable, secure and well informed. These are places that we want people to deliberately go to. We want people to travel to these places. We want people to spend time at these places. So it's important that when people do get there, they do feel comfortable and safe. They should be easy to find. There's absolutely no point in having a mobility hub which is tucked away where people simply can't find it. It needs to be a very visible experience, and the idea of branding is something that we can look at. So we've got an example there of what a totem pole could look like at one of our hubs in terms of providing a clear branding, a clear message that this is where you're at and this is where you can walk, cycle, pick up a car and get the bus, for example. I think the point about passengers should be well informed is really important. It's something that we shouldn't forget about. There's no point in getting people to a location and then not giving them the information that they need, or worse, giving them incorrect or inaccurate information. So quite often we just think about the physical structure of what a mobility hub looks like, but we also need to think about the information that we present there, paper, electronic, all different sources, and that's really important. In terms of some key considerations of what we believe a hub should look and feel like, I think it's absolutely crucial that buses serving those locations need to be able to pull right up to the curb at the right place and the right angle so that everyone can get on and off safely. I'm sure Norwich is not unlike other cities where you have scenarios where buses simply can't get to the curb, even though it's a bus stop that's very busy. The layout of the bus stop might mean that buses simply can't get on and off the bus stop correctly, and that's inexcusable in today's day and age. We really need to make sure that our mobility hubs are accessible to everyone. Express buses will serve the hubs as key priorities along routes. So we're looking at the opportunity to introduce express bus services. Most of our buses are standard, they stop at every bus stop along the route, but we've started seeing express buses now start to operate to give people a journey time advantage from key areas, and certainly mobility hubs will be absolutely key stops for them to call at. It's absolutely essential that mobility hubs are easy for people to.
Jeremy, sorry, we're losing you a little bit now and again. Could you maybe turn your video off to see if that helps with your connectivity?
Way. Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, I can turn that off. Hopefully that's better. Can you hear that better?
Thanks,
Okay,
that's great. Yeah.
I'll carry on. So I was just talking about how important it is that the catchment area of hubs is considered as well, and you know, looking maybe 400 or 500 meters away outside of the hubs to make sure that people can access the hubs really easily by foot and cycle. And it really can open up new travel opportunities by looking at how the local people can access the hubs. We shouldn't forget the fact that land is likely to be developed more intensively nearby. If you have a mobility hub there, it's a place where people will want to travel to, people want to invest, and people may want to work and set up business. And we've put at the bottom there that be almost reflecting the fact that there will likely to be a hierarchy of hubs, with some will be larger and some will be busier than others. But we mustn't forget that even the smallest hub that you have could end up being your most important in terms of how it interacts with the network. And in Rashita's presentation, she talked about should the different types of hub look and feel differently depending on local factors. And I think that's important, because that could be the case, but the alternative is to have a consistent approach so that people know what they're going to find, and that this is a location that they're familiar with, whether it's on their doorstep or whether it's in the city or actually in an area they're not familiar with. And lastly, we created a diagram to almost help with our discussions with stakeholders, and it was part of our Transforming Cities application, to try and almost get the picture across. A picture paints 1,000 words, as they say, and this is simply to show a lot of things going on in the one location. Ignore the red lines, because those are they were labels with text on, but it was too small to see. But hopefully you sort of get the picture of everything all being together in that one location. So as I said, we're very much at the start of our mobility hub journey, if you like. We've got lots of ideas, lots of things that we would like to do. We have got funding to roll that out. We would love to work with CoMoUK going forward, and with others, just to see exactly how this concept can take off. Because clearly, if people see mobility hubs elsewhere in the UK and then they travel to Norwich and they see something that's similar or operates in a similar way, then that will give them the reassurance that the network there is worth travelling and worth using. So really look forward to receiving questions you may have, and apologies if some earlier parts of the presentation you may struggle to hear.
It was good, Jeremy, don't worry, it was just the odd word that got lost, but thank you. Excellent presentation, that's really helpful, thank you. I must just say a practical thing while I'm asking Anthony to come up onto the screen, which is when we go into Zoom, if you want to be able to choose your workshop group, which is dependent on typology, then can you upgrade, if you haven't already got the latest version of Zoom. I don't want to distract from Anthony's presentation, but there's a link in the chat where you can just have that going in the background, and it'll help you to be able to get into the right workshop group. Thank you for all your questions in the chat. Keep them coming. I'm looking at those. So Anthony, do you want to come up on camera and tell us all about what's happening at your end? Thank you.
Good morning. Hope everybody can hear me satisfactorily. Firstly, thank you for inviting me to say a few words today. Just to introduce myself, I'm, as per this first slide really, I'm the Estate Director at Hatfield Park, and whilst I now have sort of overall responsibility for management of the estate, I've spent the previous 10 years very much considering our approach to development, to new homes, and transport's been firmly at the heart of that. In case you're wondering who we are or why I've sort of popped up today, I mean, unusually we aren't a public body. We are a private landowner. estate's been in existence and in consistent ownership for in excess of 400 years. And often people think, well, you know, you're a visitor attraction, you're obsessed with history, but in truth, much of our day-to-day work is spent thinking about today and indeed the future, not the past. We're a mixed business. We're involved in agriculture, a lot of environmental programs, property, both commercial and residential, and given our location within Hertfordshire, an increasingly busy part of the world, strong pressure with growth from both London in the south, only about 20 miles from where I'm sitting, and Cambridge to the north. There's real demand for new homes, new employment space, and all that involves in terms of new infrastructure, whether that be for transport or community reasons. Now, we first started thinking about our approach to growth about 15 years ago. It was very much in, as you might imagine, well, we own land. Are we going to sit on our hands and effectively probably take a slightly NIMBY or curmudgeonly view to life? Or do we actually want to engage with the process, try and create places of real value? And by that, I don't mean commercial value, I mean true amenity value to their communities, and really try to lead by example. At present, we've got about 4,000 potential new homes within the Welwyn Hatfield draft plan. It's not just about homes, though. We're also looking at employment space. And we have engaged broadly with all manner of organisations, county council, borough council, organisations such as CoMoUK, consultancies such as WSP, and sort of national professional bodies such as the ICE, and I'll come back to that later. But it's fair to say collaboration and partnership is at the absolute heart of the way we're trying to work. We're very much trying to put transport at the heart of planning. I have to say it's been a slight frustration. It's not to sound a negative note, but to my mind, to Gascoigne's mind, transport really should be at the heart of all planning. It shouldn't just be a tick box exercise or something which is thought of at the 11th hour to satisfy section 106 or other planning conditions. It really should be embedded as part of the master planning process. Interesting to hear about people talking about neighbourhoods of the future. It's very much what we're trying to achieve here. We're very much trying to look what I describe always as looking beyond the red line. So initiatives that don't stop at the site boundary or which are site specific, but how do they join up to a wider network? How do they make a broader contribution to the neighbourhoods and communities in which we all live? We really do believe good design is a win-win. That's not just a headline on the slide. We think it brings community benefits, better health, better education, better cohesion, absolute opportunity to improve sustainability. People are already talking about air quality, and we're thinking about approaches to energy, not just for transport, but in terms of homes as well. How do we create attractive places which are future-proofed or as close to that as is possible in an increasingly rapidly changing world? And how do we really encourage new communities to adopt new approaches, especially in the context of today to mobility, but also in terms of how one interacts with their neighbours? How do we ensure a broad mix of tenures? How do we bring affordability? All of these things which are generally desirable for new communities. Not claiming that we've got all the answers or that we've got a magic wand we can wave over a site. We all know it's a complex process. Certainly the planning system is imperfect for all manner of reasons, which I won't go into now. But that said, I think debates such as today and ongoing initiatives just trying to get people to think and engage and look at new ways of moving people around, encouraging modal shift, getting people to think about different approaches can only be positive. Very much looking at a whole spectrum of new ways of moving people around, really based on a hierarchy, everything from walking and cycling to car sharing, car clubs, and public transport. Worth mentioning local context. Hertfordshire is particularly well served going north-south within the borough. We're fortunate we've got the A1M. I say fortunate, it brings advantages and disadvantages, but we've got the A1M running north-south, really right up the centre. We've got the A10 to the east and the M1 a little bit to the west. I have to say going east-west is altogether different. We've got a traditional dual carriageway, which gets extremely busy at peak times. That has to traverse and cross through existing settlements or arteries. And as one can imagine, that all gets very busy at certain times of the day. Heavily car dependent as a result. And I think that's at the heart of everything we're trying to do here. We're trying to get people to focus on changing the way they move around, being open-minded to other opportunities. And previous speaker spoke very eloquently about the need for alternatives to be cost-effective, convenient, attractive, and frankly viable alternatives to just jumping in your own car. And that's very much along the lines of we're trying to encourage future thoughts. In terms of the types of sites we're promoting, we've got a wide range. I mentioned allocations of around 4,000 homes. They extend anything from our smallest site, which is about 320 homes on the southern fringes of Welwyn Garden City, so very much a sort of traditional urban extension. We've got a larger standalone village. This is quite controversial, but we see it as a better alternative than simply sprawl from existing centres. Describe it really as a standalone village, a village which you would recognise in the sort of English genre, but one which is very much designed with 21st living at its heart. So mobility hubs, future approaches to energy, walkability, permeability, really trying to ensure that it is an exemplar of development. And I suppose, to use a cliche, proof that new development doesn't have to be bad. It's interesting at the start of this, hearing about accreditation. I think the opportunity to at least try and score new developments or new schemes, to try and signpost people to some exemplars and provide leadership is really important in the present environment. In terms of the broader context, obviously these sites don't exist in isolation. We spoke about looking beyond the red line. We've been working with our partners looking at how can we actually sort of weld these into the local network in terms of bus routes, linkages with existing walking and cycling, and connections to more obvious hubs such as mainline stations, etc. And these blue and red lines on here really just hint at some of the opportunities that we have to join new development with existing settlements. And then finally, conscious of time, our partners. I mean, we're talking to a wide range of organisations, very much believe in trying to forge partnerships wherever we can. Personally, I don't believe there should be any sort of differentiation between public and private. Quite simply, I think we can achieve more working together, side by side, recognising each other's strengths, than perhaps adopting a slightly adversarial them and us approach. If we're going to bring about change and it's going to be done well, no one party can do that in isolation, and partnering will be absolutely essential. And I think really on that note, that is me done. So thank you, everybody.
Brilliant. Thank you, Anthony. I just really like that kind of message of good design is win-win. I think, you know, it's great to see you taking the initiative here, and I hope other house builders will learn from your great work here. Okay, so thank you for your questions coming in. I'd like to invite Frank Anatole, Principal Architect for Network Rail, to tell us about the amazing work that's been happening to build around rail stations, an obvious location for hubs. And yeah, over to you, Frank.
Hi, hello everyone, good morning. Great to be involved in this. I'm going to turn my camera off because my sound is a little bit sort of dodgy, and I hope it will probably make my presentation a bit clearer. So firstly, I'm an architect. I work for Network Rail. Architects are not the dominant species at Network Rail, as you probably imagine. I'm not really a stats person, so my view is probably a little bit emotive, and I think you see as I go through these slides today, there are more pictures than words. So I thought I'd get all the stats out of the way. I'm basically going to make a case for stations as ready-made mobility hubs. I'm not just talking about the big stations. I'm talking about the small ones. We have over 2,500 stations in the country. 28 of those are national hubs, which are the big stations. But over 80% are actually small to medium-sized stations, and many of those are actually sort of unstaffed. Stations are kind of unique places in terms of their role, location, services, and use, and they serve our cities and towns and villages with the same sort of ubiquity as the local town hall and libraries, except stations have much greater public usage, and they have a particular place, I think, in our identity, our sort of regional identity. So if I can, once upon a time, I think stations used to be only for the rich and famous. They were built like cathedrals, and I'll get back to sort of the word cathedrals. You probably hear me mention that once or twice in this presentation. And that was to reflect their standing and importance. Things are a bit different today. We live in a rapidly changing world with new demands. We've moved from a sort of human to a more machine level of service, which is, I often call it sort of click and collect society. It's resulted in higher expectations of comfort and sort of station user satisfaction. Our users are more diverse. They're arguably at the moment more time rich, and they are very information and data intelligent, and they use a lot of data. And importantly, I think they're looking for destinations. Before COVID, we had approximately 1.8 billion people using rail every year. And every day, that equates to about 5 million people using the rail network, passing through the stations. During shutdown, ridership fell to, in the first quarter of this year, to about 8%, which is about 35 million people. And that's actually the lowest level since the mid-19th century, if you can believe that. After shutdown, it recovered to about between 30 and 40%, but nowhere near what it was before, effectively. And as you can imagine, revenue streams were down. Both sort of climate change and health concerns, I think, are likely to permanently affect the way we travel and work. People will want to avoid small, enclosed, crowded spaces like offices and commuter trains, and they'll want more sustainable transport and working patterns. I think the personal bubble has just got sort of reset. It used to be 1.2 meters. I think it's probably more like 2 meters now. And social distancing, I think informal social distancing will become the norm. So we all know about the first and last mile sort of debate. And the questions we're now asking ourselves is, are we heading towards sort of shifting commuter patterns or periods, sort of more home working and flexible offices, remote working closer to where we actually live, with trends towards more localized commuting. It's seen as regarded as healthier, I think, in the long run, and more environmentally friendly. I think the stats are compelling. I don't want to go over those pretty much, but one of them, an interesting one I saw, was that in working at home for only 3 days a week reduces the CO2 footprint for each of us by about 2.2 tons annually. So there are really significant health and environmental benefits. The government is playing its part to a certain extent. Policy is supporting personal transport, as with gear change, and diesel and petrol cars we now know are going to be banned after 2030. And we're currently putting together some guidance on station parking. We're not calling it car parking, we're just calling it parking. And to sort of focus on mobility of all forms of sort of autonomous transport, micro-mobility and future mobility trends. We recently done some studies with Arup. We commissioned them to examine the future role that stations will play in our towns and cities, and their report, Tomorrow's Living Station, sets out a way of thinking of how stations, both large and small, might need to evolve to keep up with the pace of change. The report identified lots of opportunities for smarter stations to become sort of multimodal hubs, center of sort of movement, people, drivers of sort of inclusive and sustainable growth. But it concluded that communities of the future are likely to be more diverse and use their station in ways we can barely imagine today. Arup's more recently published Future of Stations, which we had nothing to do with, but actually just mirrors what they've said before, paints a similar vision of mixed-use hubs, new business and leisure models, sort of digital lifestyles and changing retail patterns. And this is kind of underpinned by the increasing sort of environmental and societal pressure that we're experiencing at the moment. Both reports that I've shown you actually align with something we've been doing with a project called Think Station, which we launched last year. We consulted 120 organizations and different stakeholders to tease out their thoughts on a future station. Then we fed that back into a brief for an international competition for small to medium stations, challenging the design community to come up with ideas that will change the game. A theme that came out really strongly was the positive role smaller stations could play in a future community life, as well as the need for sort of smarter stations to cater for a range of activities and people. But really, we need to think about how we're going to entice people back to transport and the networks and their stations. The concept of a smart station is coming, if not already here. I think just 2 years ago, articles like this were predicting the future of railway stations, which included health clinics and working spaces. The efficient use of buildings and space to connect and engage with neighbourhoods have potential to become centre points for richer and healthier communities. So they're kind of new places, public spaces, calm places to meet. They make innovative use of old infrastructure. You remember I said stations were built like cathedrals. There's a lot of redundant space. What do we do with those spaces? What is a smart station? I won't go too much into this diagram, but it effectively, simply put, a smart station is essentially one that focuses on 3 areas, which is management, mobility, and infrastructure. Management is about great services. You have to offer people great services in response to user demands, anticipating development. You have to innovate. You have to adopt new technology in leisure activities and events. Smart mobility is about physical and digital access. So collaboration, for example, with mobility providers like CoMoUK. Smart infrastructure is all about smart building design. Bit I'm really interested in environments, architecture, color, sound, materials, etc. And these areas, stations are often linked, especially some of the larger ones, to what we call smart living, smart economy. Smart living is about community rail groups, friends and residents stations. And the economy is about startup businesses and social enterprise around stations. And it's all underpinned by a kind of smart technology base, which is all about data, how we drive data and connectivity. So smart stations are really the beginning of what we see as a future transport hub norm. Our big stations across the country are keen to attract people back who will use their amenities, and drop-in workspaces containing things like private offices, meeting rooms, shared drop-in spaces, desk areas, club rooms and receptionists and that sort of thing. We already have examples of smart management today. St Pancras Station, with its sort of quarter-mile champagne bar, beer festivals and Elton John performances on the main concourse. Grand Central Station in New York, the sort of Vanderbilt Hall event space, which ranges from squash courts to cars. And in Japan, there's sort of experience zones, climbing walls, and pickup points. Stations are becoming a lot more varied in terms of the activities that they contain. And in the UK, Birmingham New Street, it's become a focal point of social and retailing interaction. It's become a place to linger rather than just to rush through. The concourse has become an internal sort of almost retail piazza, which sits on top of the railway. And around stations too, things are evolving. This is Box Park in East Croydon. It opened in 2016 on the site adjacent to East Croydon Station. And the focus is on kind of small and independent food and beverage outlets with a covered dining and seating area. Music performances, screenings of films and sports events have taken place here. It's been a really successful project and is a great example of how space adjacent to good transport connections can be utilised. Same thing has happened at London Bridge, a place called Vinegar Yard, which is kind of a redundant area of land next to the station. An al fresco street food and culture hub with art installations sprung up right next to the station, and kind of attracts a pretty vibrant crowd.
Antonio, we just need your microphone.
Sorry,
I can see you talking now.
Yeah, we need to move to questions as soon as you can. Thank you, Frank.
Yes, sorry, I'm almost done. Sorry. Okay. So quickly, small stations. These are the next thing, really. There are 88% of our stations are these. What have they got going for them? They're easily sort of accessible. They're well connected, and they often feature underused spaces. Some are already used for cafes, food markets, creative hubs and event spaces, and are supported by local community groups. This is an example, Tynemouth Station, which has become a sort of community market, uses redundant spaces. Seven Oaks, an old station that was boarded up, was rescued by locals. It's now become a social sort of hub. At Lowestoft, community exhibition space, again brought into life. At Preston, a bike hub, it was opened, a family-run bike hub opened up with collaboration of the train operating company. I can see a lot more of this happening. And workspaces now feature in many of our stations. This was an initiative that began back in 2014, and hopefully we'll see more of these happening. So just to finish, the question we've been recently asking ourselves is, if some of our big stations can do it, why can't some of the small ones? And can we repurpose these stations into libraries and shared workspaces? So what, can we build them to make people come to them?
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Can I invite all the speakers to come back up onto video now? Sorry to rush you there a little bit. We are trying to pack in a lot this morning, and I really want to make sure we've got time for the workshops as well. So brilliant. Thank you for all the questions that have been coming in the chat. I'm going to dive straight in with one for Rosita, I think, to start off with, which is about co-creation. What are your thoughts on working with the community to co-create some of your hubs? Sorry, unmute yourself, or I can. Oh, okay. You are unmuted, so I don't know why we can't hear you. I'll go to Jeremy with that question, and we'll come back to you. Jeremy, have you thought about co-creation with communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've seen in the last sort of few weeks, I think, from government about the importance of consultation with stakeholders and the public, and about all manner of transport schemes, most notably the Emergency Active Travel Fund scenario that's going on. But I think that applies as much to the hubs as much as anything. And it was probably for that reason that we created almost a visual picture of what a hub could look like, because it's quite difficult to describe to people because we don't have many of them up and operational. So therefore, we need to sort of present it in a very easy to understand and digestible way that people can relate to. So yeah, I mean, I'd say that we're probably at the early stages of that sort of engagement, but see it as being absolutely crucial. And I think that needs to be factored in, that these aren't facilities that you can deliver quickly without local support. You need to have absolute local buy-in for these things to work. So yes, I would agree.
Okay, Rosita, can we hear you? No. I'm sorry. I'll see if our whiz Dave can fix that. But in the meantime, I've got a question maybe for Anthony about the how can we harness the power that housing developers have that own land and developing sites, or particularly on the edge of town, to make sure that mobility hubs are considered and shared modes are considered?
I think in essence it's straightforward leadership on the part of hopefully on the part of the landowner, because we are a long-term organisation and really we're embedded within the community in so many different ways. Whereas sort of the natural criticism of house builders is, well, you're coming in and wrecking our environment. In many ways, it's our environment as well as the communities. It's one and the same. And we aren't proposing simply to sell sites to volume house builders and walk away. We're actually trying to work with house builders in accordance with a master plan, which will factor in the need for sustainable transport hubs, and other new approaches. And it was an interesting point Rosita made in terms of how do we maintain these going forward? And we're also thinking about long-term stewardship and the ways, for example, management companies, which ordinarily would contribute towards things like cutting the grass, might also make a payment on an annual basis towards sustainable transport.
Yeah, sure. Jeremy, have you thought in Norfolk about the kind of out of town areas, the less dense areas, and how you can make sure hubs and services are provided there as well as in the central areas, if you're there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned at the start, we've looked at about 33. We've identified about 33 locations, which a majority of those are actually in the outer suburbs, in the less densely populated areas, as well as the obvious choices in a city and within the city centre. So yeah, I certainly think mobility hubs have got a key role to play in the suburbs. In areas that don't have the same level of service as the city centre, but you could argue that's almost even more crucial to get the mobility hub concept delivered there, where it's absolutely crucial that everything is all combined where it can be, and that the information you provide in those locations is as good as it possibly can be. So yeah, we definitely see this as an outer suburb issue as well as an inner city.
And do you think there'll be challenges for viability there?
To a certain extent there may be, but what we've seen with the rollout of micro-mobility with Beryl, where we've got scooters, e-bikes and normal bikes, they've been pushing their hubs further and further out into the suburbs, and they are just as well used as the ones in the city centre. So it does show that even if you might live on the edge of the city, that doesn't mean you're less likely to use a bus or a micro-mobility mode. Some of our highest patronage and boarding figures are in those areas. So no, I think there's still plenty to go for, and plenty of evidence that hubs can work there.
Brilliant. Rosita is helping us by putting her answers in the chat at the moment, so thank you for that, Rosita. And obviously we'll hopefully all be able to get to speak again, if not in the workshop, but also on our forum on the 10th of December. A question for all, but I'm going to start with Frank about how important do we think that digital integration is in mobility hubs? Do we need to have integrated ticketing as well, or can these things stand alone?
I think it's absolutely critical that we have it's this sort of technology base that I was talking about. People now are very data. They use a lot of data, and they're very savvy and want to know information very quickly. I think at Network Rail we've been looking at ways in which we can use that the data that people produce. We have to be obviously very careful about privacy, but to provide better services for people. We all have mobile phones or some sort of data sort of device, and that's the way in which we communicate these days. So I actually think it's vital.
Okay. What do other people think on that? Anyone else want to come in on whether we need digital integration as well as physical integration?
I would agree with that, absolutely. From our perspective, a lot of the work we're doing is to make information more accessible, particularly to those who have difficulty accessing information. So we've got talking bus shelters, for example, that are using the Alexa technology that enables people to access information a lot more easily. Almost the approach they would use in their home. We're trying to allow that approach on the street. So yeah, I agree.
Bus stops, great. I like it. Okay, I think we will wrap up questions there. Thank you ever so much, and I'm sorry we haven't got to everybody. We do have our cafe social space where we can carry on doing discussions after the workshop. But for now, we've now got to do the seamless switch, which will get posted here shortly. You will be moving over to Zoom now, at which point you'll be able to select, hopefully, which workshop you will be going into. And there'll be workshop leaders in each of those sessions. So thank you ever so much to our speakers, and I will hopefully see you all in Zoom shortly. Thank you very much.